All right, we're back. We have Matthew 19 with us, and he's about to leave Judea, but where was he at the end of 18?
Well, I'm going to go back to verse 32 of chapter 18 and read to verse 35.
Okay.
Then his Lord, after that he had called him, said unto him, O thou wicked servant, I forgive thee all thy debt, because thou dearest me. Shouldest thou not also have had compassion on the fellow servant, even as I had pity on thee? And his Lord was wroth and delivered him to the tormentors, till he could pay all that was due unto him. So likewise shall my heavenly Father do also unto you, if ye from your hearts forgive not every one his brother their trespasses. And just remember, going into debtor's prison and going to the tormentors were two different things, and one was a lot worse than the other.
Yes.
So he went to the worst.
He went to the worst one. I actually forgot that's where we left off. Maybe I just didn't want to think about forgiving, and so I
did talk about
so
that.
I just left that off. Anyway, so that's where we've got. But after he gets through talking about this and stuff like that, now he leaves Galilee.
Mm-hmm.
And if you want a little geography lesson, Israel is a long nation.
Mm-hmm.
Sea of Mediterranean Sea on the one side, desert on the other. It runs down from up here at the top what was Israel? Israel and Judea, but up here in Israel, up at the top is Galilee.
Mm-hmm.
It's Galilee, around the Sea of Galilee, and then you follow the Jordan River down,
mm-hmm.
and the Jordan River flows into the Dead Sea, which is down in the bottom part of it, or the southern part, and it says he leaves Galilee and he goes to the coast of Judea beyond Jordan. So he's going from up around here in the top, he's going all the way down to the bottom. Not all the way to the bottom of Israel, but down into the bottom section of it.
Right.
And so he's down in Judea. Now, the description of what they're talking about in that distance where it puts him around Jericho,
mm-hmm.
which is northeast of Jerusalem.
Mm-hmm.
And so what he's doing is he's leaving the nice comfy area, as comfy as it gets.
Right.
It's his home. He's leaving Galilee, which is more comfortable. There's less Pharisees. There's less of the legalistic religious people.
He's heading to the lion's den.
Yeah, he's heading to the lion's den is what he's doing. And he's leaving his adopted home of Galilee and Capernaum, where he's done most of his ministry for so far, and he's heading towards his death.
Well, and being closer to them,
to put it bluntly, he's headed to die.
The closer he got to their base of operations, if you want to call it that, their home, the more uncomfortable they were going to become.
They're going to become more uncomfortable.
Because if he became more important, they would become less important, and they couldn't have that.
And there's another person that he's coming in contact with the closer he gets to Jerusalem. The Pharisees are all over the place. The Pharisees are at their the Pharisees are at the synagogues, and they're kind of all over the place. Now, the majority of them are probably down closer to Jerusalem because that's they want to be there.
Well,
but as you get towards in Jerusalem, there's the temple.
Yes.
And in the temple is the priest and the high priest.
Mm-hmm.
Now, and in Jerusalem, it's the Sanhedrin Council. And so he's getting close to their home base. He's getting close to where they're at.
The farther away,
he's moving east and crossed the Mississippi, and he's headed towards D.C. This is what he's doing. Prospectively, this is what he's doing.
Well, and the farther away, like people around here, they think you've got to be in the cities like New York and D.C., and if you're not, you're in hick places. Well, he knew where the real people, true people were, the people he needed to reach first.
Yeah.
Now he's going to deal with the cesspool.
He's the swamp.
A lot of like today, huh?
He's going to go visit. He's going to go visit the swamp.
Yes.
And they don't want to be drained.
No.
And so that's where he's headed.
Sounds familiar, doesn't it?
It does. But that's kind of what he's doing. That's where he's headed.
Right.
And he knows the result. The disciples aren't wanting to admit it yet. He's told them a few times. But he knows why he's going there. and it's unpleasant, but that he's headed there. And on his way there, according to verse 2, it is an unpleasant thing he's headed towards, but he's still being followed by a large group of people, and he takes the time to heal them all. Now Matthew is kind of just jumping over that now because it happens all the time. He just continues to heal people when they follow him around. He just continues to do that.
I think some of the things that Matthew starts getting into is so we understand how badly the Pharisees wanted to trip him up, and how frustrated they were because they couldn't.
Yeah, and they're coming to a doozy here. It's
big time.
And this is still debated today, and there's multiple versions and there's multiple concepts, and I am familiar with pretty much all of them.
Yeah.
From all sides. But the Pharisees, starting in verse 3, the Pharisees come to him again, and they've got a good question this time. They think they've got him. And so they come to him to tempt him or to trip him up because they have a two-part question. They come prepared this time. Normally they only have the one question. They've been working on this. They have a two-part question for him now.
Well, he catches them so often.
Yeah, so they have a backup. So they know they know how he's going to see. They've read the scripture. They know the answer to their own question, and so they know the answer to the question, and so they have a backup. They have a follow-up. They're trying to trip him up. And verses 3 through 6, the Pharisees ask him. It says they came to tempt him, but they say unto him, "Is it lawful for a man to put away his wife for every cause?" Now keep in mind how they word it. Yes. They know better than that. They already know better than that. But Moses didn't tell them they could divorce for any reason. That's never been the case. And but that's what it's gotten to. They're just putting them away willy-nilly. You know, they get tired of them. They just don't want them anymore. They want somebody else.
They want to change, but they know they have to be married, so they divorce, remarry,
and the Jewish
men,
and then
marry again, back to the original.
Right, and the Jewish men in this culture have to be married, especially if they want to be like a Pharisee or a priest. They have to be married, and so they marry people, and they usually marry for it's arranged marriages, or they married for position or whatever, and they ended up not liking them for whatever reason. Or they saw something else they wanted. Temporarily. And here's the fun part of what a lot of them were doing. They would arrange to, they get another guy, and they would both divorce their wives and then marry each other's wives for a little while and then divorce them and go back. They were doing that.
Quite an offense to God.
It was legalized wife swapping is what it was. And he was not having it. Jesus wasn't having this, and so. But they tried to trip him up. They said to get rid of her for any cause or for every cause. And Jesus said, instead of answering the question, I love how he does this. He very seldom directly answers their question. Instead of answering their question, he directs them back to the scripture. He said, "Have you not read?" Do you have where you read where it says that in Genesis?
I do.
Have you not read that he created man and woman and he put them together? God created marriage. Have you not read this?
The verse that
Jesus quoted it, but she's going to read it.
It's the first book of Genesis, chapter 27. But I'm also going to read 28 a little bit. Okay, so it says, "So God created mankind in His own image. In the image of God, He created them, male and female. He created them, and that's what He specifically spoke to them. What God then did was to say, God blessed them and said to them, "Be fruitful and increase in number, fill the earth, subdue it, rule over the fish in the sea and the birds in the sky, and over every living creature that moves on the ground." He blessed that union and intended it to be a blessing, and they were actually trying to, or had created it as a curse.
Yeah, they had created a mess. And they had taken and perverted what God made. And God made...
He made marriage.
He created marriage. In verse 5, verse 4 rather, it talks about how he made man and woman together to be together.
Right,
and in verse 4 he told them how he created marriage.
Oh, in 5 he said, "For this cause shall a man leave father and mother, and shall cleave to his wife, and the twain shall be one flesh."
Which is an Old Testament quote.
Yeah, and it's very important. The one flesh, they're not two separate people in a committee meeting. You're
right.
You're
They're
to
joined.
be together to be stronger.
Mm-hmm.
We've talked about it before. It's the weakness in one may be the strength of another, and
Mm-hmm.
when husband and wife is working together in sync, that's the way it is, and that's the way it's supposed to be.
And it's not always just one strong when the other one's weak, and sometimes it's just weak and the other one's strong. And
Right.
sometimes it's front and back. Sometimes the one goes to the front, the other one's supportive, and then they switch places. And then the other one's strong, the other one forces. And they work together as one, because there's a word called synergy.
Mm-hmm.
It means the parts make the whole is greater than the parts. And so together they become more than what they were individually. A married couple that become twain is more than just two individuals working together. It becomes more than that.
Right, and that's what
that's
God
what,
was
that's what he
wanting to
intended.
bless, and
That's
what he
what he
intended.
intended.
Okay,
And so he threw that at them, and they knew that. They know what Genesis says. They have Genesis memorized. They know what Genesis says. But then God said, that God put them together, so man doesn't have the authority to take, let no man take them asunder if God put them together. And so that was not what was intended. And he said and so in verse 7 they come in and they said, so they got their backup question.
Mm-hmm.
They got their follow-up, their part 2 to attack him with, because they knew what the answer for that one was going to be. It was a stupid question. They asked it. A stupid question to me is one where you already know the answer, and you're just saying it and you're just asking it to be a problem. This is what they did.
Right.
And so now they attack him with part 2, and they said, okay, so if I love how they put the if in there. If God created marriage, they know he did. But if he created marriage in such a way, and if God intended for it to be, I feel like Andy Griffith doing his ifing. Anyway, but if God created marriage and God intended them to be twain and God intended them to be together forever and to not be taken apart, then why did Moses command us to give them a divorce? A command?
Yeah, Moses can't command.
Moses didn't give them any command. Moses gave them the 10 Commandments from God. That's what Moses did. Moses didn't command them to get divorced. Moses allowed them to get divorced.
Yeah, God didn't want it, but God also allowed it.
And there was a reason for that, too.
Yeah, and that's what we're going to get to now, which is Deuteronomy 24, verse 1. When a man hath taken a wife and married her, and it comes to pass that she find no favor in his eyes, because he hath found some uncleanness in her, then let him write her a bill of divorcement and give it in her hand and send her out of his house. There had to be something specific.
There had to be a reason.
And it was, and we were talking the other night, so I love you. I know you're just waiting to give this detail.
The word that is used, Jesus says you can't divorce her for every reason. Moses never said that.
No. Moses
said you had to find an uncleanness in them, which Jesus said unless he put them away except for the cause of fornication, is the English translation in the King James version. Mm-hmm. That's how it's translated. The Greek word that was translated is porneia, which means sexual perversion of any kind. Mm-hmm. So they found a perversion in her.
If a woman or man were unfaithful to their spouse, that would be a sexual perversion.
That would be a perversion. There's also another one. One is they're just a deviant. Mm-hmm. They are unfaithful. Or there's another one where that early on in the book, Joseph thought Mary was. Mm-hmm. She had been unfaithful prior to their marriage. Mm-hmm. He was promised a pure wife, a virgin. And that was the agreement. It was a contract. That was the agreement. And she did not appear to be a virgin. Right. She was pregnant. In normal senses, that would mean she was not a virgin anymore. And she had violated the contract. And so if he found that out after the fact, then he would be allowed to break the contract and get rid of her, give her a writ of divorcement, and it would be perfectly okay, and be well within the law. Any of these would work. Any of these would work as a reason for the divorce. But you don't get rid of them because they got gray hair, or because they got fat, or because they're sassy, you know? Or because they can't bear. Or yeah, it's a good thing. Or because they couldn't bear you children. Maybe they were barren. You couldn't divorce them for that reason either. You couldn't divorce them for just any reason.
Right.
That's what Jesus is telling them. You have made a perversion, and you have twisted God's commandments. That's right. You have twisted something God made beautiful, and you have perverted it. Don't come to me. It was because of the hardness of your hearts that he did it.
Not God's.
That Moses gave it, not God's. And by the way, they were killing their wives, by the way. That's the reason Moses allowed them to get divorced. They had the hardness of their heart, and since they had to stay married until death, they arranged the death. And so they were killing people. And so Moses allowed them to divorce, and they knew exactly what he was talking about. He said the hardness of their heart. They were killing their wives and husbands. And so in order to stop the killing in that regard, he allowed them to get divorced. Now, if somebody was divorced improperly, Jesus is telling them, if you divorce a woman improperly, then you have, because the society in that, it works both ways, by the way, but in that society, the men had control in that culture. And so the woman had very little options if she was divorced and kicked out. She had very little options in life at that point. And so they said, if you kick her out, then you caused her to commit adultery.
Right.
You are causing her to sin. Because now she has to go get married to somebody else just for protection. Or she has to choose a lifestyle that's not proper. And so you have caused this, and this is your fault, and you will be held accountable.
And we've covered before that
when you cause
if you cause someone to falter,
and you cause someone to falter, or if you cause someone to sin, the judgment
is pretty harsh.
The judgment is on you, not them.
So now we're going on to another part that's unique in thoughts for them.
Well, I had an interesting thing when I read verse 10. The disciples, after hearing Jesus' description of needing to stay married and not being allowed to get divorced for whatever reason you choose, they said, well, then it's good not to be married then. That's an interesting concept for the 12 chosen of Jesus. That's an interesting response to me.
That's saying they're going to sin. We know they're going to sin, so, you know.
They're like, wait a minute, if I can't get rid of her for any reason I want, then why do I want her? And and I was like, these guys were not brought up proper. These guys.
Why was Jesus there? That helps.
And so these guys had a little bit of learning to do. But now Jesus he tells them, not everybody can hear this. Not everybody is called to this. He talks about eunuchs. A eunuch is a man that doesn't get married, or if he does, he can't have children. He can't function sexually. He can't do that. And I won't go into it, but anyway. Some are born that way. There's 3 types of eunuchs. Some are born that way. They're born sterile. They don't function. For whatever reason, they can't function that way. Number 2 are made. Usually the king's guard or the guard of the harem were made eunuchs, so they could trust them. The 3rd are eunuchs by choice. They have dedicated their life to Christ. They have dedicated their life to God, and they don't have a physical relationship with a partner, male or female. Women can do this too, by the way. There's a whole bunch of nuns out there that have dedicated their life to God. I'm not Catholic, but that's what they do, to my understanding. And the priests do the same. That's the idea behind it. They have dedicated their life to God, and they don't want earthly relationships to interfere. To take precedent, to have the potential of taking precedent over their relationship with God. And so they're focused.
The interesting thing too is, like with nuns, and I'm getting off subject just a little.
Not really. They are essentially a eunuch.
Many of these people, many never married, chose it from the very beginning. But there have been women who had been married, had children, maybe become widows or whatever, and then chose to become a nun and serve God in the fullest extent of that.
And they are essentially eunuchs. They have chosen that direction. It's the same concept.
But they have an understanding of what they gave up, too.
This is true. And I think it's harder for them than the ones that never knew. In my opinion. Anyway, but the idea is that they don't want any earthly distractions from interfering with their service of God. And then we get back to the little children.
Yay!
He's just
Some
hanging
of
out.
God's favorites.
He's just hanging out and talking to people, and these little kids come running up.
With
and the parents,
joy and happiness
and joy
and
happiness,
enthusiasm.
and the parents bring them, and they want them blessed, and the
Right.
disciples go away,
No way.
leave him alone, because
They think that he's too important
he's
for
too
the
important.
children.
He's important. He's up here, and the grown-ups are talking. The kids need to go away. Need to be seen and not heard. Well, Jesus didn't have that impression. Jesus wanted the children in the middle. Jesus wanted the children there.
And he and I have talked about this. Some churches think that you have to have special programs and the kids have to be so they're not in the sanctuary and they're not disruptive. And yes, they can be disruptive, but
wouldn't want them making noise in the church,
Yeah. I think that sometimes you can have special programs for them. I understand that, and I've been a part of that. And I agree with you that sometimes I think having them there, having the noise, having them there, having them hearing it. And so I'm throwing it out there because in your church, what way do you do it? And could there once in a while be a reason for a change?
I think it's important for the children to see their parents worship God.
God, I agree with you.
I absolutely believe that. I mean, I don't mind. I agree that they need to be taught on a level that they understand. But on the other hand, I also think they need that time where they see their parents hear the word of God. They see their parents worship God, and they see their parents pray in the fellowship with everybody else. There's a reason for that. And I mean, I grew up in church. I learned way more of Scripture and of Bible and about God and about Jesus than they thought I did, because I didn't appear to be paying attention. I was doodling on a notepad, or I was, I was drawing pictures, and stuff. But I was also listening, and you hear it, time after time after time after time over years and years and years, and you can quote it, and you don't even know where you're quoting it from, because you've just heard it all the time.
So let's hear what Jesus
there's
has
a
to
reason
say
for that.
about it.
About Jesus and the little children?
Yes.
It's one of I think Rose's favorite lines. So I'm going to let her read it. It's in verse 14.
It might be. It says, Jesus said, "Suffer little children and forbid them not to come unto me, for such is the kingdom of heaven." These are the gifts. They are a precious gift. And we can destroy them or we can build them up. And he was saying, let them come to the kingdom of heaven. Let them be strengthened.
I like the way it says, suffer little children to come into me. Suffer little children. In other words, make them. Send them. Let them
bring them to me.
Not only just let them, make them go. Bring them to him. Not in a mean sort of way,
No.
but encourage them to go that way. Encourage them to do that.
Develop that relationship.
Encourage that, and that's what he's talking about.
Right.
Encourage them to come to Christ. Don't forbid them. Take the other approach. Don't forbid them. Encourage them to go, and I love the way he puts that, though.
Yes.
For little children. But he laid his hands on them and blessed them all along, every one of them, and then departed. And as he was going, verse 16, we get another little section. We get another little insight while he's walking along. Are you ready to go on?
No, go ahead.
Okay. We get a young rich man. And the young rich man said, "Good master, what good thing shall I do in order that I may receive eternal life?" And Jesus' first part of his response is, "Why do you call me good? There's only one good, and that is God the Father. There's only one good. God's the only one that's good. Humans are not good." In other words, he's talking to this man. He said, "Why are you calling me good? Only God's good." But see, he knew that man did not know he was God, and he was not recognizing him as God. He was recognizing him as a teacher, as a human. But as long as he was recognizing him as just a man, no matter how good a teacher or a prophet he was, then why are you calling me good?
Right. He needed to bring him back to...
Jesus was good because Jesus was God, but this man did not know it.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, what things should I do? Now see, this is a common problem even today. What do I do? What do I do to make heaven? What do I do? And they want to know what I do. How many scriptures do I need to read? How many hours do I need to pray? How many meals do I need to give to the poor? What do I need to do? Well, it's not a matter of what you need to do. It's a matter of what's in your heart. It's a matter of what you believe.
And what's in your heart?
The doing will come, but it's what you believe. It's what's in your heart that gets you there.
Right. It's accepting the gift that you don't deserve. We don't deserve. And understanding you do, first of all, you do nothing except
what we learned in the last part of the last chapter.
Except that gift.
The forgiveness that we received for a price that we couldn't pay. Jesus is still dealing with that. So the guy said, and I love these little comments. He goes, well, Jesus said, all right, well, we'll keep the commandments then. What do you want to do? Well, keep the commandments. That's what you can do. You can keep the commandments. And I always found this guy's response interesting. He says, which one?
Mm-hmm.
What do you mean, which one?
So he went through all the commandments.
What do you mean, which one? God gave 10 commandments. He knows which commandments he's talking about. God gave 10 commandments. And it said they were all equal. They were all, if you were guilty of one, you were guilty of all. So what do you mean, which one? You keep them all. And so the guy said, Jesus said you keep them all. He named several of them. He said you keep them all. And he said, I have done this since my youth. I have done this all my life. And which is a lie. He has not. Nobody has.
He thought in his mind he had.
He's convinced himself that he has, but we know he hasn't. That's a lie.
None of us have. So I'm getting to it. I forgot to mark this, so I'm going back to it.
And so, what is he supposed to do? He said, okay, then.
Before you go to that, I want to read Leviticus 19:18. And it says, "Thou shalt not avenge nor bear any grudge against the children of thy people, but thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. I am the Lord." That'll strike you, because they had a lot of vengeance.
Yeah, they kind of.
Some of us.
Yeah, some of us do. All the forgiveness from the last chapter, we don't always do.
No, it's hard.
It's hard, and we don't always do it. And when you don't have forgiveness, you reach vengeance. You want retaliation. You want, and Jesus and Leviticus said, "Don't do that."
Right.
And this is what we're talking about.
He Jesus reminded them.
We'll do that. Keep the commandments. And he said, "Well, I've done that." Well, it's a lie. Jesus knows that. But he went along with it, and he said, "All right. Well, if you've kept all the commandments, there's only one thing you lack. Sell everything you own, give it to the poor, and follow me." And this disturbed the young rich man because he had a lot of stuff. He had a lot of great possessions. He was a very wealthy man. And he went away sad because he had great possessions and he couldn't get rid of them. They meant more to him than God. And here's what Jesus was saying to the rich man. This is what he was saying to him. It had absolutely nothing to do with his possessions. It has absolutely nothing to do with being. There is nothing wrong with being rich. There is nothing wrong with having stuff. What the problem is when the stuff means more to you than God. And he said, in order for you to be perfect, get rid of everything that's holding you back. Remove the things that are more important than me. And then follow me. And the rich man couldn't do it. And the problem was things were in his heart that were more important than God. And Jesus knew it, and that's what he was pointing out to him. Yeah.
And I love what he says. It gets quoted a lot, and I've said it myself. In verse 24 it says, "And again I say to you, it is easier for the camel to go through the eye of a needle than the rich man to enter into the kingdom of heaven." If you're holding on to possessions, you can't see God, and you don't see him before you because you're not looking for him.
Do you know the visual that he's presenting to him? These are walled cities.
Right.
They're walled cities for safety because there's marauders out there. It's not safe. And so the cities are walled. Well, they have gates. And at night they shut the gate because you can't see people coming in and out, so they shut the gate to keep the place safe. And if you come to the gate when it's closed, there is a way in. They aren't going to open the big gates for you, but they will let you in. It's a little door on the side of the gate, and it's a little door, and it's small enough that you have to take your camel, you have to take everything off of it, because otherwise it won't fit. You have to take all the baggage off of the camel, all of the stuff, all of the baggage and all of the things that it's carrying around, all of the things that are weighing it down. You have to take them all off. And then the camel has to get on its knees and crawl through the gate, through the little hole, the little door in the gate, one at a time. They have to go through one at a time. And so the guards, if somebody's causing a problem, they just chop their head off. But if somebody's trying to, you can't get in, you can't invade the gate of the city that way.
It's going to be protected.
And it causes them to take all the stuff. It's a big process. It's a process to undo a camel, and camels don't really like crawling on their knees.
No.
And so it's getting them to do it is hard to do it. And he said it's easier to get a camel to go through the eye of the needle, that's what that's called. That little door is called the eye of the needle. It's easier to get the camel to do that than it is to get a rich man into heaven. Because the rich man will not get rid of his riches. The rich man will not unburden himself.
So, you have to think, what have you burdened yourself with that keeps your heart from seeking God?
And so if you want to make it into the kingdom, unburden yourself of anything that will weigh you down or slow you down or keep you from fitting through the door, and get on your knees and before God and come into the kingdom.
And when you do that, then all of the other things fall into place. What gift you have, you use it. How you help, what you do it. So
once again, Jesus is not saying it's not the money's not the problem. The rich man can get in, but the money has to be less important. It's not the money that's the problem. It's the love of money that's the problem. And another place it says the root of all evil is the love of money is the root of all evil. The money's not evil. The love of money is. And so the disciples want to know, and it's an interesting question for their time. Well, then who can be saved if the rich man can't get? If it's so difficult for the rich man to get saved, who can be saved? Well, they had the same problem that a lot of people have now. Wealth equals God's favor. This is a myth. It's a fallacy. Are people wealthy because God blessed them? Some of them. Some of them are wealthy because the devil blessed them at the moment. And it won't last. But money's money. Were they blessed by God? Maybe. Were they blessed by the devil? Maybe. Well, but you can't tell just because they have money.
Wealth is totally different.
Yeah, and different people's idea of wealth is different. Yeah. In this country, we see a big fancy car or a great big house. That's a sign of wealth. Some countries, wearing shoes is a sign of wealth. Yeah. So it depends on where you're at. What's considered wealth.
And verse 26, God said, "Behold them," or Jesus said, "Behold them, and said unto them, with men this is impossible, but with God all things are possible."
Yep.
And Genesis 18:14 is what it was referenced to. "Is anything too hard for the Lord? I will return you at the appointed time next year, and Sarah will have a son." If you remember, Sarah was told she was going to have a son, and she was in her 90s, and she laughed.
Yep.
And they said, "You laughed?" And she even denied laughing out of embarrassment.
Yeah.
But they said, you did laugh, and we will be back, and you will have a son. And she did. Because it's not impossible for God.
Nothing is impossible for
God. And then the
next
next one is Jeremiah 32:17. And it says, "Ah, sovereign Lord, you have made the heavens and the earth by your great power and outstretched arm. Nothing is too hard for you."
Okay. Now, was it the last chapter or the chapter before when Peter went after? It was the last chapter, at the beginning of the last chapter, after Peter went fishing in 17 and 18. They asked who was the greatest in the kingdom. Well, Peter revisits. In verse 27, Peter revisits. It's always Peter. It's Peter again. Peter's talking again, and Peter probably shouldn't, but Peter's talking again. And he wants to know, okay, you told the rich young ruler that if he wanted to get into the kingdom, to sell everything and follow me. He said, we gave up everything. All of us, we gave up everything. Peter's really speaking for himself, but he's including everybody. We gave up everything and followed you. And Peter did. Peter gave up, that's no lie.
Yeah,
he gave up a prosperous business. And he's following Jesus around, and he has a wife and a mother-in-law and stuff at home. And he gave up a lot of things to follow Jesus around. And so he said, what do I get for this?
Well, and
what
Jesus will answer, but the verse that relates to that goes back to Deuteronomy 33:9. Who says of his father and mother, I have not seen them, nor did he acknowledge his brothers, or know his own children, for they have observed your word and kept your covenant. Basically, he was saying, I walked away from all of that. I've not responded to them. I'm not going back to them, even if they call me, because I'm with you, Lord. And now Jesus answers.
And Jesus actually has something serious, has something big for them. They finally asked. Before they were like, well, which one of us is greater? Which one? Well, he's not going to answer that.
Right.
He said, but this is a legitimate question. Peter's wanting to know, we gave up a lot. We're risking our lives here. Right. Not only do we give up our livelihood and follow you around, we're literally risking our lives at this point. What is in it for us? What do you? And it's not one of those, well, what's in it for me type of statement. No, that's not the case. Peter honestly wants to know what he's going to. What are they getting out of this? Where are they following him? And Jesus, in verse 28 says, "Verily I say unto you, that ye which have followed me, in the regeneration, when the Son of Man shall sit in the throne of his glory, ye also shall sit upon 12 thrones, judging the 12 tribes of Israel." That's huge. That's huge. They are going to sit on, these 12 are going to sit on thrones, and they're going to judge Israel.
It kind of made me think of when Moses had to, he was trying to take care of everybody, and he finally had to say,
he had to delegate.
And broke it down. And God is, or Jesus is saying, you give up all, but you gain more. You will be leaders.
Now, Jesus is giving them something huge. He's giving them a huge promise. This is a big thing. You'll be kings. That's what he's telling them. You'll be kings and judges. This is and in the kingdom when I come back, and in the spiritual kingdom, this is what you're going to be. He said, but it's not. This is not cheap.
No.
The price is high. They are going to pay a high price, which he tells them about it repeatedly as they go along. Huge reward, high price. But the price they're going to pay, that's what he keeps telling them, the price, no matter how high it is still low compared to what they're receiving, to where the reward that's waiting. And he went on further, not just them. He said, everybody that follows me, if they've given up family or fathers or mothers or sisters or wives or livelihoods or houses or cattle, whatever they've given up, they shall receive it back 100-fold. They shall receive more than what they ever dreamt of having. More than what they ever gave up.
But the most important thing that he says here is, shall inherit everlasting life. I don't know that they fully understood that.
No.
And most of us don't.
And I don't think any of us really can. I think none of us can really wrap our mind around eternity. But that's what they're given. They don't have to worry about dying.
Right.
That's what he's given them. They're going to live forever. And he comes back when they asked who was going to be the greatest. Verse 30 harkens right back to that, because he knows they've been all the way from Galilee down to Judea. They've been percolating this whole thing that he's been telling them, and they've been talking it over amongst themselves, trying to figure out what he was telling them. And so he still comes back to it, and he said, "And many that were first shall be last, and many that were last shall be first." He said the kingdom doesn't work. The kingdom of God doesn't work the same way that the natural world does.
And it isn't about what your position is in this world and in this time, but it's about how in that position did you serve God. That's where the least can be first and the first can be last. If they put the importance in what their position is here and what they have here, and there are good people that have wonderful things and have both. They have that position, they have that wealth, they have that respect, but they also serve God in amazing ways. So we're not saying that that's not possible, It's how do you serve
And
God.
and those right, and those in first and be last and that's first. You don't know. I was told there was a guy, and I don't remember their name, so I'm not even going to try.
And I
He was an evangelist.
Uh-huh.
He would go places, and great revivals were held because of him. But this one man would go. He knew the guy, and he would go to the town that they were going to have a revival in a week ahead of time. He would rent a hotel room. He would stay there. He was there a week ahead before the revival, and he spent an entire week praying for that man, praying for the city, praying for the revival, praying for the souls. Didn't ask for anything. He never got named. He was never given any credit. During the revival, the evangelist got the credit because he was the one up front talking, and he got the credit for all the souls being saved. Of course, God saves the souls, not the evangelist.
Right.
But it was those kind of things. But did the evangelist really get the souls saved, or did the guy that was praying for a week get them saved? Which one got God's attention? Which one? This guy got his praise here. The evangelist got his praise here. The prayer warrior got his praise and glory. So which one? The first is last and the last second. The janitor may have a higher position,
right,
and when he gets to heaven because of his faithfulness to God and how he served.
and so that is the last part of chapter 19. And take from this, reflect on your relationship with God and the people around you. Reflect on the talent that He has given you, and think about how do you serve. It's important right now that we really hone that skill and use it.
Absolutely. All right. See you next week.
Bye.